get started. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Really happy to have everyone here and have this discussion with Fred and Lex. I'll get us started by just kind of giving a little bit of an intro about who Jeli is, who I am, and then about Fred and Lex. So, my name is Rian. I run product here at Jeli, and we're an incident management platform, a one-stop incident management platform that goes beyond the response and really focuses on learning from your incidents and getting better at them. But today is mostly about Fred and Lex and Honeycomb. I think all my friends use Honeycomb's observability solution. I think that's everyone's favorite. I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with their work and what they do. And then we're really excited to have both Lex and Fred here today. I imagine most of you know them already from the industry, but Lex is a staff SRE at Honeycomb, interested in all things running large, massively multi-user online services. That's what gets him going. He also runs the SRE Weekly newsletter, which I'm sure you're all already subscribed to. But if you're not, I think we'll drop a link in the chat here. And then we also have Fred, who is also a staff SRE at Honeycomb. He cares about SLOs and error budgets, on-call health, alert hygiene, and incident response, and everything in between. So a lot of history there, and a lot of insight that we hope to gain from them today, and hopefully just hear them talk to each other about these things. I think we're all excited to learn about that. So I'm going to start off just by asking, maybe with Fred, by asking you, can you talk a little bit about the background here, Honeycomb's incident management practice a year ago to what it is today, and how that process has been for you all?
Yeah, so we've been using Jelly for what is probably a year and a half now. Before that, when I joined, I was the first SRE at Honeycomb. I was embedded on the platform team, and what we had was a small team that was very senior and very good at dealing with all kinds of outages, production surprises, interrupts, and stuff like that. Uh, so my role is something that I saw mostly being about pushing the culture forward rather than wanting to change it or having to undo a lot of bad patterns. And the high amount of experience we had as a small company was really pleasant for that because there was very little scaffolding to give people. Everything was really good at self-organizing and whatnot. But we knew, and I knew back then, that incident reviews would be a bit tricky. It was still using the Google Docs template sort of approach to all these things. And whoever ran them was a bit whatever you could have. That was like the one specialty I felt I had to bring and contribute on early on compared to most of the operational practices that the team already had. So over the course of a year, we slowly started growing the SRE team, hiring more people, building the sort of role we wanted to have within the organization. And I brought in Jeli mainly for incident analysis after the fact, not necessarily the management at the time and everything, but really the analysis because I believed in the approach of the sort of analysis mode of thematic analysis, getting the content, surfacing that, having a discussion, and focusing on learning for the incidents compared to whatever we had. And during that time, while we were rolling that out, eventually Lex joined the SRE team and everything, but we also grew the overall engineering team and the overall organization at Honeycomb and started having more departments interested into what was going on in incidents and communications and how we could make that easier. I always had a big aversion to heavy frameworks of severities and communications, and if you declare the incident, these things automatically happen, so people are shy about declaring incidents and stuff like that. But I knew that Jeli had the incident management bot, that it's a minimal thing, would let us do the channels, the sort of notifications that different departments wanted. And the moment we started getting discussions with different stakeholders elsewhere in the organization that were not just the incident responders, of them wanting to participate and be kept up to date, we turned on the incident management bot in Jeli, and it got almost instant adoption because there was a real need for it at this point in time. We sort of just like kept it in our back pocket. The moment it was needed, we turned it on. And now Jeli is something we use almost from beginning to end of the incident flow. I think the one thing we don't do through it is going to be the alerting, the paging, all of that, because we're using our own product to do a lot of that.
Mm.
So, as Fred mentioned, I joined pretty much almost exactly a year ago. So we'd already started using Jeli by then. This is the first time I got to use Jeli, though. What I had used in the past was incident bots, like for Slack, where you can tell it, for example, spin up an incident, and that means create me a Slack channel, create maybe a Jira ticket or something like that. We don't do that here at Honeycomb for Jira specifically, but those automations, so you have like your little automated copilot, so you're not trying to run through those things. And I've also had to do them by hand, creating a channel, getting everyone over there. Definitely having the bot by your side to do that kind of stuff is really key, and so it's been really cool to see that adoption here.
So just going back, you guys started specifically on before you had the bot, you used it for the analysis piece. Can you talk a little bit more about just your approach to incidents and learning from them and analyzing them and what the goal is? I know once we talk about retrospectives and error budgets and action items, we get into a lot of philosophical things. So I'd love to just know where you all are at with that and how you've brought the organization along to this world of incidents aren't all bad. They're learning opportunities. How was there a change management thing there? How did all that work?
No, generally I think because the team was already self-organizing at the start, that was not a big concern in terms of dealing with the change management and everything. Like, I'm a big believer in a lot of the things coming from resilience engineering, and my experience, especially this company, has aligned with a lot of it. Of you get into an incident, you sort of fix it, you get to the incident review, and all the key action items have already been done, and people have already analyzed everything by the time you got there. So the incident review for me, the main focus is the one where what we want to do out of it is learn, especially learn as an organization. And one of the things I like finding the most in an incident is a place where two people had a different understanding of how the system worked, had these visions clashed, and we have to have a discussion to update everybody's mental model a bit and share the information and learn from there. Because it's one of the basic thing I really, really want to have in general, which is we don't necessarily find good solutions if we don't have a decent understanding of what happened. I think the blame aware format or portion of it was already in place. As I said, I had to change very little about culture. So for me, Jeli in incident analysis was really interesting in that the overall workflow, and that's we were early adopters before there was like the narrative line and everything that you could do in there, was really that tool of here is the ingestion of all your events. I'm going to read through them. I'm going to tag them. I'm going to annotate them. And that's going to take a good while. After that, I'm going to go over all my notes and see, is there something that's standing out in there? And I'm going to let like the themes come up from this analysis and bring that to the incident review. And it's one of the things that revealed to me really subtle patterns I hadn't noticed before, even though I was participating. Like every time before someone does it, they announce it, they wait for a reaction with a kind of deadline, and then they go ahead and it's like, oh, that's a thing we do that works really well. And then we made it explicit, and it became like a continuous practice we teach everybody joining the organization at that point. Yeah. So for me, the big value was there.
Lex, you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. So it was really interesting coming here. I've been at several different companies who do incident response differently and incident learning differently. Honeycomb's kind of cool because everyone's really interested in working together and curious and learning, both in the incident response part and also in the learning afterward. So, for example, one thing that happened was the first retrospective I went to in my first couple of weeks here. The very first thing Fred does is start reading out this long paragraph of the incident retrospective ground rules. So it was things like, we're here to learn. We're not necessarily focused on action items so much as trying to understand what people's mental models were. We're blameless, that kind of thing. That was a really cool practice. And then I also got to see how he went through the timeline that he had built in Jeli. It was a pretty neat experience. I actually wrote up the ground rules as a blog post, which is on the Honeycomb blog.
And I think we're pulling that in. Can you talk a little bit about how you run these reviews and who attends them and maybe some of the challenges? Like, is it sometimes part getting ideas or expertise out from your subject matter experts, or like who's involved here, and how do you manage that?
So the earliest reviews we ran were just usually within a team. So you have a review with 5 or 6 people, you go over the events and everything. The approach I started taking is really one of having done this analysis, going over the timeline, and this approach of I sort of do it a bit like a talk show. Of I have the timeline. At this point, we see this thing. What were you looking for? What was surprising to you about this? I've told everyone what would be happening before the fact. Like it's a really it's a bit more like an organized talk show. It's not surprise questions. Nobody's put on the spot, but it's a sort of panel discussion with all the participants in the incident. And we started growing the approach and the way we schedule them until we sometimes have up to 40 people in the review, even though we have a smaller amount of participants. The thing that I like, though, about what we do is that this is my approach. We have other people on the team who have an entirely different approach, and Lex has probably the highest contrast with what I do because Lex prefers something entirely different, and I'm going to let him describe that.
Yeah, so it is really interesting. First of all, we've had several different people leading retrospectives, both doing the organization in Jeli beforehand, the sifting through, and then also running the meeting. And I think there's a real advantage to having different approaches and not doing it the same every time for a couple of reasons. First one is kind of a surface level. We don't want to get people bored. I've definitely been at a place where we had a commitment of running a retrospective meeting for every single incident. I subjected Fred to this. Sorry, Fred. And it was, we definitely ran our retrospectives, but it became a tedious chore that people went through. And we had our rubric that we would go through in the Google Doc, and it basically became like, okay, we're going to go through the timeline. Come on, everyone. I'm going to drag you into this retrospective. People would be like afraid to declare incidents because they would be dragged into a retrospective meeting. We would go through, that timeline and in kind of exhaustive detail of what happened during the incident. And then we would go through like basically a couple of usual suspects would monopolize the conversation and just basically go through everything that they did. And then, yeah, I'm sorry, Fred. I'm trying not to like call you out because we kind of set you up to do this. Like, this was the structure we had created. I was in SRE at the time. Fred was not.
Yeah, at a different company, we overlapped like close to 10 years ago now. So it's been a while, but we sort of spread apart and came back together at Honeycomb.
I see Joy in chat. I'm sorry, Joy. I'm I guess I'm treading a little on toes here. I apologize. But
I feel very attacked right now. Don't feel attacked at all. You're completely correct. And I love what you're doing right now. And I'm stealing it. I'm stealing it.
Great. Well, I stole your rubric of things to do because they were useful things to look into, like what was the timeline, what was the impact, what were people thinking at the time. But we discovered that people got sick of the laundry list and that a free-form discussion allows people to, I may have those items in my mind when I'm doing the retrospective, but going through the doc, it put people in this rut such that they weren't free enough to really do the kind of learning and free association that we wanted, and the mental model calibration where people are like, oh, I didn't know that was how you were doing it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Lex leads everything a lot more like a round table. The overview of the timeline is extremely short. Mine is one of trying to bring people back in time. But the focus is sort of the same in that we really want to learn about what happened in the incident. And to me, that's one of the key things where if it's someone more junior trying to facilitate an incident, I'm going to hold their hands a little bit more. But once it's someone that, we've talked to and we know they have the right mindset to run it however you want to run it. Because if you have that focus on learning, the format can change. And like Lex said, we also have a policy that we don't need to investigate all incidents, right? We pick those that we think are going to be interesting. And my rule of thumb, so long as I've been here, has been I prefer to have like one very in-depth review than a lot of shallow ones. I'm not necessarily looking yet for the cross-incident patterns of everything, but studying into the messy details of what makes something challenging for me is what helps us build the best understanding. And it definitely helps with the pacing Lex mentions of people not getting fed up of running incident reviews and then not declaring them, because we're in the middle of an incident and people go like, oh, that's really fucking weird. Like, we need to review this one. And they call it, I want to make a review of this one because I want to know what happened. And if it's a basic one, people are not like hiding it. Just like, yeah, that's a run-of-the-mill type of incident. We don't care.
So sorry for swearing. Are there specific criteria that you look for to say, okay, this thing is worth of a retrospective, or is it more of a vibe? Yeah, this feels like we need one.
So can I take this one? Because stepping back a minute, as Fred said, I do kind of have a different approach, that I don't want to spend long on the timeline, because I've gathered maybe up to like 40 people in this meeting. So this is a really expensive meeting I'm running. So I want to wring as much value out of it as I can. So what I'm looking for really is, what surprised people? What happens when I get people together in a room and like get them bouncing ideas off of each other, so that we can, even in that moment, in that retrospective meeting, discover new things about our system that people didn't know, or some people learn things from other people, like, oh, that's how you build your model of what our system is doing. So when I'm looking for what incident to run a retrospective on, I mean, yeah, the really big ones, obviously, for one thing, you need to run a retrospective on that, because your upper management's going to be like, what are you doing about this? This was a huge incident. But other than that, I'm going to look at maybe a more minor incident, or maybe even especially an incident that was a close call, but that we didn't actually have any user impact. Because what I'm really looking for is, what are the conversations I can have? What are the things we can learn from? And that does not equate necessarily to what was the biggest impact.
What worked rather than what went wrong as well. It's easier to do an incident that doesn't go full blown.
Yeah, like we're gonna probably have a retro soon about a non-incident that happened on Friday. I was on call, and Fred and one of our coworkers, Nathan, were like, "Hey Lex, we just prevented you from getting paged," and I'm like, surprise face emoji. Say what? They had caught a deploy that had snuck through and kind of was starting to cause serious problems in staging, and was about to go to production, was about to be promoted, and they caught it and stopped it. And so it's like, okay, what can we learn from that? Yeah, it was a close call. It didn't happen. But maybe 30 seconds later, it could have been an incident. So that's something to pay attention to. And, there's probably some learning to happen in there, so we can make our system more resilient and more likely to catch these things, and make that kind of close call less different, or less scary. One sec, I'll let you in a sec. And the thing about those close calls is that you can get people to open up more, because there's not the big thing hanging over them of like, I was involved in this big incident that caused all of our customers a serious amount of pain. So those can be ones to especially look at. God, Fred, sorry.
No, it's all right. One of the things that we have as well, and that hasn't been mentioned, it's a bit in the retrospective ground rules that we linked, that Lex wrote for us in the blog, is that aspect of saying we're not actually looking for the action items in this meeting. If we have time at the end, we're going to do them. And for some specifically big incidents, we've run a distinct meeting with a subgroup of people for them. But early on, when we were trying to do the Jeli thing, there's a specific incident review where what we did was run the full review, and then just after that, half an hour break, and then the action items review as a second one. And the thing we observed in that one is that we could get like 30, 20, 40 people in the incident review, but the moment it came to action items, everyone who was just like craving the learning or understanding what happened wouldn't come. And you had like only 7, 8 people who thought they could do something about it. And splitting these two modes is generally not done. A lot of incident reviews are geared with the idea of building the action items. And in the pattern of knowing you're getting to the action items, and that's the meat of the meeting, people are just like going to be passive the entire way and chime in with the action items they knew they wanted to do before the meeting even started at the end. By just avoiding them entirely, that helps at least gear the meeting have that whole different mindset, and to actually do it on learning, not just like pretending to learn until you put your action item in there.
So can you talk a little bit about how Jeli fits?
Sorry, I want to riff on what Fred just said. This is drawing from Emily Roop's talks, and also John Alspa, the Etsy debriefing, the incident debriefing facilitation guide, where they introduce this concept of don't go for the action items, because if you look at action items and aim for action items during a meeting, first of all, you're going to make 1 million. You will not implement even half of them. It's just how it works. And second of all, when you hit an action item, that's when you stop. You're like, problem solved. And then if you had taken like 2 or 3 more steps in the conversation, maybe like another minute or 2 of discussion, you might have come to a really interesting learning, but you've stopped short by stopping at those action items. So that's part of why we do that. And sorry, Rihanna.
No worries, no worries. Well, I want to dig deeper into this a little bit and just understand a little bit of how Jeli fits into these meetings as well. Like, how do you use the product as part of your reviews, your retrospectives, your analysis of these incidents?
To me, one of the biggest value I have in it is that Jeli is not, for us at least, geared towards these action items that you get into most incident review management and things like that. It is geared towards the workflow of building the timeline, making something you can present. And for us, it's like you do your homework before you run the review meeting, and Jeli helps you do that. One of the things I like the most about getting in there is just like, we can get rid of the templates. I absolutely hate templates for some of these things. When I'm talking about an incident, ideally the thing we do is really think about what happened, the things that were surprising, things Lex mentioned already. And a template sort of puts you on rails, where the structure of the template guides the structure of what you think about. And I really, really enjoy this template-less approach of, you build the thing, you have to think about it, figure out your narrative. That's where the heavy work goes into running the review. And then you can just run the meeting and ask the questions you knew would be interesting and let the conversation take over. So for me, that was like one of the major key points of that one, is I want to get rid of the template. But it creates its own challenge, because now you need to train everyone into being a better incident analysis. Like, it's not true that you take a great incident analyst, they write a template, then everyone is suddenly great. But if you remove the template, everyone who's just like hobbling along and not necessarily knowing the reason why things are done the way they are, suddenly they don't know what to do. So removing the template had to come with training sessions. Starting with a smaller group, and we picked the SRE team because that's where you're most likely to find your incident nerds, but we have some people outside of that. But we changed the model a bit of training people up into being a bit better incident analysts, pairing with them, and having a core team that can run some of these reviews and some of these analyses, and not going back to the template. And that's a whole different way of structuring that sort of work.
So is that, oh, go ahead.
I was going to try to answer your question too, Rian, as far as how I use Jeli. So Fred and I have a different style of how we use Jeli to prepare for an incident review. I think, Fred, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you go through and you tag each line. Is that right?
I do the whole thematic analysis and tagging things.
Yeah, so you're reviewing every line of chat and tagging it with, and developing themes, and maybe reviewing the entire chat multiple times. Is that true?
Yep, yeah. The bigger the incident, or the weirder, the more thorough I am. For something that's a bit more straightforward, I will like gauge how much effort I put in it differently. But yes.
Yeah. So I'll usually review the incident chat once, maybe twice, and rather than tagging every single I love how flexible Jeli is, because we can have these different styles, and that allows us to discover different things and fill each other's gaps. I like to just go through and look and start to develop those key ideas. I just build, like in the timeline, like a couple of key ideas as I see them pop out, like themes that are happening in the incident. And it's not necessarily my goal to find, to build a rigorous timeline of everything that happened in the incident. What I'm looking for is those discussion points. And I'm not looking for too many, because if I come into a retrospective meeting with 7 or 8 different discussion points, I'm going to be rushing people. We're not going to get to all of them, and we won't have time to or freedom to dig into each one, and people will feel overloaded by all these topics. Instead, I'm looking for maybe 3, and then a couple of backup topics in case everyone goes quiet and it's crickets. And I'm going to go through the timeline at a high level, as Fred said. Maybe spending 5 minutes max, because I don't want to spend all that time and spend all that money on reviewing stuff that a lot of the people at that meeting generally know already. And then I'll jump straight into like, hey, I want to dig into more on this. For the bigger incidents, I'll even reach out to people in advance and be like, what were the things you were thinking about, or the things that you found interesting, to try to find those themes. as I'm building that up.
Yeah, the themes like that, I think, is we both structure our reviews based around the themes, and I want to emphasize what Lex said about you can't pick them all, right? I like to compare that to writing a biography for someone. You can have the detailed timeline, but you can't write a concise book that tells the life of someone that starts with the lunch they had when they were 5 years old, unless that lunch really defines a lot of things for what happened. So we do pick like 2 or 3 of the most significant things, and try to drive that and have a few in our back pockets if we need. And that choice comes either from the structure of the incident, or it can also be about sometimes like, hey, this is a pattern we've noticed in other incidents. People have complained about that. Let's use this incident as an opportunity to dig into this thing that, knowing a bit the pulse of the organization, we know is significant right now. And that can help a whole lot guide a discussion. It can be helpful.
Do you review the timeline, the Jeli timeline in these retros? Sometimes, not all the time.
The question is how much detail you put into it. Right, because you can make a timeline of a 3-day incident and it's 3 lines, like what happened in day 1, what happened in day 2, what happened in day 3, or it could be a 15-minute incident where you had 60 small decisions made at a high pace, and the length of the incident and the pace they have just decide, depending on what you're going to emphasize, what you want to do. And in some cases, like, it also goes into why we pick incidents, because we think there was something interesting, and that interesting thing has to be a theme sometimes. And we have incidents that are not necessarily super bad, but that are rare. And we're going to say we want to investigate that one because, I don't know, a database failover is not something we see every day. But if we have like a spate of problems, we've had 15 of them in the last month, it's not that big of a deal if we don't investigate that one right now. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for that problem to happen again because it keeps happening. So you focus on the rare one sometimes instead of the big annoying one, because you know you're going to have time to do the big annoying one that's really frequent sometimes. And it's that sort of balance between people's times, what you think is important for the org, and the opportunities you believe you're going to have to do them again as well.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, you're saying focus on the ones that are interesting. One thing I do as I'm reading the timeline in Jeli is look for people being literally surprised, going, wow, or whoa, or I didn't know that. And now I'm thinking, like, as we're doing this, I'm kind of live thinking like, hey, maybe I should be searching. Maybe I should just use the search capability and look for the word wow, because that's where things, that's where at least one person's mental model just went,
Yeah, that's not what I thought it would be. That's really interesting. Let's move backwards a little bit to the response piece, because you mentioned you started on the analysis piece and then you added the bot. How did you respond to incidents before, and how did using the Jeli bot change those responses for you, as not just within your team, but I'm also curious how for other teams that communicate with customers and things like that.
Well, I can say one thing is that when I first joined, and the Jeli bot didn't quite exist yet, I don't think, right, Fred? There was definitely at least one incident where I didn't know who the incident commander was. Like, I was just reading along because
the bot didn't exist when we started, and when it started existing, we didn't turn it on right away either. We waited until there was a bit of a need there.
So whenever I join a new company, I always just like to, the first few big incidents that happen, or even medium incidents, I like to go read the chat, scroll back just to see what happened or follow along. And there were definitely ones where I'm like, who's the incident commander here? Who's running this ship? Someone is. Is anyone? No one declared it. The Jeli bot, it's right there. It says right in it. And you have to, keep it updated. So that's cool.
Yeah. The pattern we had before, it's sometimes a bit harder to say you're going to have like a strict incident response when you have like 4 people in your call rotation and they're always in all the incidents. At some point, it's choreography more than command that you need in an incident. But as the organization grew and we went from having, I don't know, a team of engineers of about a dozen people to many dozen people, that pressure got felt more and more. And because the seniority started varying across levels and who is answering, then you need to start giving some people some support. And for me, what was really important was balancing the amount of support that the framework and the tooling gives you and how much constraining it does at the same time. Because any sort of framework you adopt in that way comes with this assumption on the structure that can be like both supporting but also constraining. And I've dealt with bigger frameworks in the past that I felt were always overly constraining, and put a lot of focus in people telling them like, hey, if it feels confusing, like take take a break, ask yourself, what is the emotion that's going on right now, and is it a need to ask for more hands, and focusing on how to escalate and when to escalate rather than supporting the escalation itself. And we were definitely reaching the limits of that. I think we started turning on the chatbot after we had a week where we had 4 parallel incidents, multi-day incidents going on at the same time. It was just a goddamn nightmare. And after that, just went like, yeah, there is a definite need for structure, no matter how much I hate structure. Like, I have to admit we're at the point we need it right now. And the Jeli bot was really interesting for having that thing of telling you, like, who's the person accountable for this? The incident commander, there's a name. Who's dealing with comms? Which channels do you want to have for that? And is there anybody that needs to be pinged at the same time? Where do you put the update? And that basic structure gave us something like 50-60% of the coordination mechanisms that we needed to call out socially almost every time with a lot less effort. And so it was very minimal structure to me, and it was supporting structure rather than constraining structure. It reflected some of the things we did and prompted people to do some of these things a bit easier. So someone not used to being in an incident doesn't forget about them as much. And I know that Lex has more experience with way bigger organizations than Honeycomb and than I do. And so I'm expecting that over time, like, I'm going to reach more and more of these points where I have to let go of my self-organizing, improvised method and to give more and more of that support. And negotiating that in the right proportion as we grow for me is one of the really interesting challenges I'm constantly looking for and looking towards in the future as well.
I would say maybe, not definitely, have to give that up because there's value in that.
Yeah.
For that week of heck that you were talking about, I think we had at least one incident, one of those incidents we reviewed, but we also had a meta review of just the fact that we had like a week of 4 or 5 incidents, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And I think we have Nick here in the audience. And Nick is not necessarily in the engineering team, but knows a bit about running these incidents. And because everyone was involved in the engineering side on these 4 incidents in the same week, it's just like, we're out of people, we need more people. And we like to have someone who wasn't both hands in the incident at the same time doing them. We called on Nick. Nick was graciously willing to go and run the meta review for us about, like, hey, how did we deal with these 4 ongoing incidents and what was the response? We didn't necessarily dig into like individual incidents, but just like, how did we restructure the way we manage incidents to deal with 4 of them happening at the same time?
One of the things I'm hearing you guys say, which is also interesting to me, is you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but you don't want the product to be too prescriptive. You have a way of working and you want it to be flexible enough to be able to work within the ways that you work, and you feel like that's how this works for you.
Yes. Big believer in picking a solution that matches the needs that you have and the people that you have, rather than this is the framework of this other company we really trust, and so we're just going to borrow it and hope for good results.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what we do is that sort of, not necessarily first principles, but really early principles analysis of, here's the challenges, the understanding we have, the way we work, the capacities that we have, the capabilities that we have, and what can we do that has the lowest friction, brings us to the place we want to be. And we iterate a whole lot on how we do that work. But I think that's something Honeycomb does at a deep level, at the product level, in the way we manage projects and everything. There's that constant feedback and reobserving of the things we do. I think it's a good winning pattern that I want to keep us doing.
I will say, yeah, that flexibility is cool, especially because we have different approaches. But also another one of the Jeli's strengths is being opinionated, for example, about the fact that you should have a review and that you should try to come up with these key ideas and build a timeline of, so there's kind of a delicate balance.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have, I'll ask the eternal question, do you have rules around what is an incident and who gets to call an incident? How does that work?
Yeah, that's that I've seen many articles written on this, and a lot of the common wisdom is declare an incident for everything. Okay, then people might get a little sick of incidents, but if you can make it less unscary to declare an incident, then yeah, you can definitely declare incidents. Like if you have some kind of thing in the sales org or something like that, teach them how to declare an incident, because that need to coordinate multiple people who maybe don't work very well together for a really fast basically super high speed, high stakes project is what you're doing, that spreads beyond just engineering, and there's a lot of benefit to be had. I mean, anytime we're doing this kind of fast action, it's high risk, right? Because you're trying to make decisions quickly and take actions quickly. So having that structure to, if you're going to be doing this kind of thing anyway, you should try to build it into that structure to get a handle on that risk.
Yeah, and I forgot what I wanted to say, and this is recorded. I look great. No, I forgot. That's all right.
Okay. No worries. So there's a question in chat here that I want to ask and add on to it. Someone was asking if your SRE folks run all the retros or if it's different people. And then I want to add to that and say, was it difficult to get more people into that process? How did you do that?
Our SRE folks run most retros. Not all of them, but most, with the simple reason that, again, this is where we located the incident nerds. And that helps a whole lot. The pattern we're trying to do and pushing a bit outwards recently is trying to get teams to review their own incidents, but maybe pair with them or guide them in the process a bit more and do that sort of knowledge transfer. There's this criteria for SRE, I think, comes from Google. If your team should grow sublinearly, so if you have like twice the number of employees, you don't want to have twice the number of SREs to run that sort of process. And we're in the level where I think our SRE team is really good at running that, but we're also involved into a lot of the incidents as well. And we try to keep that pattern of ideally you're not, investigating yourself. When we do the review, you're not reviewing yourself, somebody else is doing it. So it's been one of our ongoing objectives to spread out the amount of people who do the Jeli stuff as we go forward. In terms of incident management, during the incident, we also have a platform team and SRE team, and we're like sisters team under the same organization. And we tend to, anyone in there, be an incident commander doing these things. The review is a bit more SRE only right now, but I think it's going to be a bit of a counter pattern. We can't expect everyone in all the teams to be incident experts, but I would like it for us to be able to find a few people who have affinities for that stuff and can help lead or support the effort within each team. Like 1 or 2 individuals per teams would probably be good. In the meanwhile, it's reasonable that SRE folks who tend to like incidents more have a bit more of that burden because it's less of a burden for them. They like it a bit more.
But there's a big benefit to us getting folks in other teams to do this, like for example getting Nick T to run one, because we SRE folks, because we're incident nerds, we often all will, even if this is not a great practice, we'll all pile on the incident. So we're all in the incident and don't have the ability to take that step back look that can really help from an incident retrospective facilitator. Having someone come fresh and have to ask all those questions, things that I would take for granted, and therefore I will only go like a little bit down that knowledge tree. Someone else from the outside running a retrospective will be like, what? No, I'm sorry. Can you explain that again? You just glossed over like 5 different things. I'm like, oh yeah, there's this, this, and this. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that, all leading to this direction. So yeah, there's some serious advantage to getting other teams to do this kind of thing.
The more shared your context is, the more things are plainly invisible to the people sharing that context, and having someone outside of it better questions a lot of the assumptions and the directions that go in there.
Yeah. So I'd love to follow that thread a little bit. And as a product guy, I want to talk about impact and outcomes a little bit. Like, so you're like a year into this process. You've used Jeli for about a year now. How have you seen this change your organization, and how are you using Jeli to communicate outside of the engineering team or the people directly responding to incidents? What have you seen change in your org over the past year?
The biggest one for me is the size of the incident retrospective meeting. As I said, where we started was 7 to 8 people, mostly technical folks, but some of them feel sometimes like almost a podcast. And we had one incident review that one of our colleagues ran where people went like, hey, we would need to publish this and make that like public to see like, here's how Honeycomb runs incident. And we sort of vetoed that idea, saying no, because the moment you start sharing your incidents and it could be a public performance, people no longer participate the same. Like the psychological safety we have established is the #1 priority in these things. I'd rather not run a review, kill a review or something than ruin that psychological safety. So we've never shared it, but it has this reputation internally for some folks at least that it's going to be a good use of your time to understand what the hell is going on. Honeycomb has the advantage of being a tool that is extremely close to people running operations, SREs and everything. So we have interest even from sales of going like, I want to understand like how folks are using our own product and solving the incidents and how they could explain a few things and whatnot. So the amount of participation for me is the biggest difference that I've noticed. The other one I could see of the incident review process in general has been repeated incidents or incidents that have the same components. And the first time they happen, we're like, this is a rare one. We've not seen this before. The incident lasts 6 hours. We find a solution. The second time it happens, impact might be a bit different, but it lasts 15 minutes before people jump to what was known before. And we've been able to track like, hey, the team is much better at managing this sort of stuff than they were before. And that alone is a good outcome, even if none of them had action items. Some still do regardless. But for me, those are the two most noticeable things. Understanding any incident and how quickly people seem to get oriented, and participation levels. Lex, I don't know if you have a different point of view of that one.
I was also going to talk about the participation level and specifically mention that we're getting, folks from engineering teams where they've had an incident. SRE wasn't necessarily involved, and we don't have the bandwidth to run a retrospective for them. But they're being like, "Oh, can I get a quick crash course on Jeli? I want to go run a retro," and that may not have happened before.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So what have you learned in rolling out Jeli? It's a new tool. Engineers don't love new tools if they don't know where they're coming from. What are some advice that you might have for taking a tool like Jeli and helping people see the value in it and start to use it?
One of the analogies that we used before, and I think Jeli used it a few conference talks in the past, was the analogy of cooking a good meal. And if you really, really care about that, you're a foodie or something, you're going to grow your own vegetables. You're going to carefully make your own spice blends. You're going to cook everything slowly. You're going to prep the thing, and you're going to go, that's a healthy meal. But it took you like 3 days to get just the ingredients and everything going. There's an importance between figuring out how much of an incident nerd you are and you want to do the deep thing, and how to get a healthy meal on the go, which means you don't want it to be entirely fast food. You have to find a way to say, if you cut this corner and you buy like pre-cut vegetables, that's fine. You have vegetables. That's the important part. You don't have to go through the entire grueling process of peeling them and cutting them and cooking them as something. So for me, one of the key points was going to figure out, as we were rolling this out, where is it okay for people to cut corners, because they're busy people, they don't care about incidents at the same level, and how do we give them like the core vital elements that lead to a good outcome, even if they don't have like the exact methodology that the nerds like us would like for them to have. And being able to know ahead of time, like, this is where you compromise, this is where you don't. Like, you don't compromise on a psychological safety. You can compromise on how deep you're in your analysis. Like, so long as you're having a conversation, good enough. To me, that's one of the basic things where if you have that, a lot of everything else is easier in driving the adoption.
Yeah, I would say to sort of chime in on that, thing that I've learned is, really crystallizing that each of us has a different approach in how we run those retrospective meetings. And it's really cool to see that contrast.
Yeah, and there's no single way to use Jeli, which means you don't have to worry you're going to do things wrong necessarily. You can do it.
We care about some principles more than the process of how to get there.
That's great. We have a few minutes left. I wanted to see if there's anyone on the. I'm going to have a few moments of very awkward silence and see if anyone is willing to come off mute. And if you stay quiet long enough, someone eventually can handle it and they come off mute and ask a question. So does anyone have a question for Fred or Lex? I can't even stand those.
I could go back on what Nora said in chat. Jeli for Mega Review is one of her favorite use cases, which was interesting. That big Mega Review that Nick ran, we sort of went like, don't even use Jeli. There's too many channels, too many things. And Nick ran the incident outside of any of our tooling because we felt, at least at the time, it's going to be too long. Do the thing that you think is reasonable to look into the process. Go directly to interviewing people. For us, it was interesting because there was so much content about a week going so bad that we sort of went like, it's not reasonable to ask someone in a different part of the org to spend like 2 weeks of their time just reviewing 4 incidents to understand how the meta approach went. So we tried to be flexible. If you figure out Jeli's not for you, don't use it for that one, although we'll encourage you to do in the first place.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah,
every
questions
incident
about
in Q3.
Yeah. Any other questions about running incidents, running analysis, running retros?
I have a question. We always get customers asking how can they include like non-technical teams in their process, and you guys do a really good job of that. Where did that stem from, and how has it evolved?
It depends on where we include them. Like if it's in the midst of incident response and it's busy, sometimes there's just the approach of, hey, we don't have the time to slow down and evaluate the impact for specific customers right now, come back later. Like there's a pacing to some of these, but at the other levels, it probably helps that so much of our organization cares about the work we do for operations because we're the biggest Honeycomb power user there is almost. So there's already that fascination internally of understanding how we use the product because all parts of the organization get to learn from watching customers do things by watching our incident response goes. It's one of the things that makes this easy for us and isn't necessarily true from other organizations.
So for me, it's stemmed from so my desire to get teams that are not just engineering involved in these retrospectives. It stems from the general trend in the SRE industry toward mental models and socio-technical systems as opposed to just an operations, mindset of like this server, the CPU, et cetera. And we're talking like, the overarching socio-technical systems. Well, those involve far more than just engineering, and they're, all those pieces of your socio-technical system are critical to the proper functioning and to the resilience. So you can find that the constraints that your people were under stemmed from not just engineering concerns, but from the like project management or finance or sales concerns. And in fact, you can also find that salespeople were involved in incidents, or like we tried to figure out what action to take, and we had to go and talk to like product and support and sales and execs to understand which actions we can take. So they have a perspective, and if we stay in our own rut, in our own little engineering mindset, I mean, we engineers are really good at talking. We're really good at filling airwaves and dominating conversations, as we're doing right now. But getting those other mindsets and other experiences that are different from ours in is really critical to truly understand how our system works, because they are involved, and we shouldn't silence them just by talking too much.
Support always important to bring in there. There's a lot of organizations where support doesn't get the love they deserve, of having a different type of signal for different type of customers and being key stakeholders on so many communications. Sales, as Lex mentioned, fully supporting that, and often they are the strongest advocates you may have for some of your users existing one into the organization. They might care about renewals, things like that. They have an understanding of what frustrations they have. It's a great one. Product seconding what Lex said. And in some cases, for some incidents, I think we don't try not to have them there. It's usually easier when you don't have execs in the incident retro itself because of the entire power dynamic situation. But in some cases, it's useful to go like, hey, we asked about them, and this type of choice where we sacrifice A in order to salvage B is something that the organization agrees with. It's in line with the priorities, and we've got the okay from the top to do that to make that kind of decisions. There's a lot of flows in there where fully seconded Lex in there. You want the full perspective because engineering is just a tiny part of what it means to engineer a product. It's the people like putting it in place, but so much of the decision making happens outside of there. And having their perspective and them having your perspective is a key point for future decisions to lead to better engineering there.
Just pulling that on the thread a little bit, you've mentioned that you're incident nerds, so obviously extremely bought into learning from incidents and that whole philosophy. Whereas I imagine the rest of the org sometimes still sees every incident as a bad thing. Oh, the business is going down, that kind of stuff. How have you seen the past year and using Jeli to kind of change some of that mindset in not just in engineering, but in the rest of the org as well? Like, do you communicate broadly sometimes about these incidents and what you've learned to executives and other parts of the organization?
I think we have the advantage there of having high-level execs who have an engineering background. So that sort of cultural element is driven strongest at the core of the company, where it gets around engineers. The idea that, you know, counting incidents is not necessarily a good metric in the first place. The impact, blah, blah, blah. All of these metrics that people find a bit dubious don't have a lot of traction internally. It's easier to push back against them. We've had experiments of getting designers, people from sales who want to run it for them, of them shadowing people on calls so they get that sort of understanding. And we've also discussed, like, would it help, for example, to run one of the incident reviews we have with the method we have on sales calls? And, this contract fell through. What can we learn from that? And there's a different approach to blame and responsibility in that one, depending on where you are in the organization. So I personally have a very engineering-centric view of it, where the company is also engineering-centric on a lot of points, so it all looks really nice and grass is very, very green. But even within the organization, there's a level of variation there where you need to do a bunch of groundwork before unrolling that sort of process to shape the culture a bit more.
Yeah.
So I don't have much to add as far as the Honeycomb culture side of things, but I love sharing a brief story I have of the late Dr. Richard Cook, where he said that he was quoting someone else saying that there was this major incident and they'd lost a couple $100,000, and someone asked the CTO, "Are you going to fire this guy who pulled the switch that that did the thing?" He's like, "Are you kidding me? I can't fire him. I just spent $150,000 training him." The sort of unplanned investment mindset is really useful.
Yeah. Have you tried or thought about using the Jeli bot and opportunities for things that are not incidents, like releases or like an important sales call, sales cycle, some of the things you've mentioned?
It's mostly happened within engineering. We've used it for chaos engineering. Essentially, there's a inherent risk of running some amount of chaos engineering. You hope nothing bad happens, but having the entire thing take place there could let you review the content. It's automatically recorded. And also, if it devolves into an incident, you're already in place. We also have a few things that are projects, or I think we had someone in the organization going like, there might be legal issues with something, and they started using a Jeli channel to track things for a while. Our security team makes use of the private channels and private incident reviews to an extent that is unknown to me, because for them, there's also that practice of being able to run private incidents for security concerns or threats at that level. It's not the most spread out practice, but we're seeing a little foothold for some things of happening and using it outside of incidents because the mechanisms are useful.
Yeah, we've got one running right now that was an engineer has been working for a couple months on this new tool that will help us with managing our load and balancing workloads to different parts of our infrastructure. And it's a new tool. He's tested it a ton, but he's not quite sure that it's going to go well. And he mostly just wants that heightened awareness that comes with having, a Jeli incident already running, even though it wasn't an incident. In fact, it went really well. It did the opposite of customer impact. It made everything better for everyone. But just like Fred was saying, had it there just in case it went pear-shaped, and also just for awareness. The engineer in question flagged me on it because I've been on call for the past week up until an hour or two ago. So I could watch along and really easily consume what was going on. And now also we have a ready-made situation so we can review how this, what led to this project to succeed. You know, like having a retro on something that succeeded is awesome, because we don't think about that often, but that's the thing we want to do more of. So we should be looking into like, what was the root cause of success? You know, since root cause doesn't exist, but you know, you should be you should be looking at the contributing factors of success so that you can try to emulate that in the future.
Yeah, it comes back to what you said in the beginning. That's a fun retro to run. Is this went right? Why did it go right? And what can we learn from that? That's great. I think I have one last question, and that's around when you hire new engineers and you onboard them onto your process. How do you help them understand your incident culture, your incident management culture, and how do you onboard them onto this process and your philosophy and make that repeatable?
So engineers go through regular onboarding, and about 3 months after they joined, we start going through what we call the on-call onboarding, which we formalized a bit recently. And there's two sections to that onboarding, and the first one I call the on-call orientation. And essentially, the entire thing is just like, what does it mean to be on call, and how do we choose to do it here? And there's a whole section about it that's about the principles, like the responsibility belongs to the team, not to the user. You're only carrying the pager for us as a service right now, so you can't, blame yourself too much for things that are going to go right. The accountability for it goes to the entire team, and a lot of it is just going like, you've possibly been on call elsewhere, or you've not been on call anywhere. Here are the principles we want in our on-call culture and that we've been driving so far that we think are going okay. And a lot of people who had bad experiences on call before suddenly go, I feel much more confident from now to be on call by doing that. And then like a week after, we have the other session, which is specifically what are the tools we use, what are the responsibilities you have, and something like that. So we've made room in the onboarding specifically for what's the mindset we have to on call. We're going to put you on call for things we don't have run books for because it's new stuff. You're expected not to know what's going to happen. That's okay. And just repeating that to people takes a while for them to process it, but I believe it helps a whole lot for them understand the approach we have that's a bit homebrew for a lot of these things. So yeah, the welcoming to the kind of culture, the analysis, the approach, and all of that is done as part of onboarding now, because not having it cause people a lot of anxiety going, oh, I'm going to go on call, there's not enough run books, I don't know, like nobody's shown me how this works. Like, you don't need to know how it works. We're trying something here where you can be on call without that, and here's the reason why it's okay. If that makes it easier for people.
For sure. We have a couple of minutes left, so I want to give you guys an opportunity to tell people where to find you if they want to harass you about root causes or anything. So what's the best way to reach you?
You can email Lex at sreweekly.com. I don't do the whole Twitter thing or whatever, so
Yeah. My URL is ferd.ca, F-E-R-D.ca. If you go to the footer at the bottom, there's like all my social media links are supposed to be in there. There's an email as well. So that's the one I keep up to date. So you just need to remember the domain name.
Awesome. This has been really, really helpful. Thank you both. It's been really awesome to talk to you. I should start a podcast. This is great. And just ask people things. I love it. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you everyone else for joining us today as well. If you want to hear more about Jeli, just reach out to us and we'll get you set up. And thanks everyone and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much for putting this together, and thanks for having us here. This is really fun.
Sure thing. Thank you guys.